Hi there, welcome to another video. As usual, my name is Jeffrey, and on this channel we talk smartphones and generally tech, but I like smartphones. Sorry, scratch that. I love smartphones, so I like to talk about them as much as possible. Have you ever gone to the market, like you want to get a new phone, and then like you see the names on this phone sometimes? Pixel 6a, this Lite, Pro Max, Ultra S. Like there's so many catchy and funny, sometimes outrightly funny names that you can see. Some of these names are also very confusing for a lot of people, especially the suffixes that they add at the end of their phones. You'd see something like no other place can you see like something so weird as the a very good example would be the Xiaomi Redmi Note 11 Pro Plus 5G. Like, what's all that? Yikes. There are some companies that do not follow these naming models, like Sony Xperia 3, for example. Like those people, their naming just sucks, basically, totally sucks. So I want to talk about like the more common naming schemes, suffixes that you see. But it's basically just a scheme. There are suffixes that you see on the back of like these devices. They're not just there because people are trying to like hype up their product. It's basically supposed to give you an idea of what class the phone is and how it would probably perform. Now, I know lots of people have their own like different ways of categorizing phones, and everybody has what works for them. There is no generally acceptable one, but the one I think that works best for me is the multi-level system, which I've been working with over the years. I didn't come up with it, but I basically modified it to fit. So I guess I'm going to use that. It's what I've been using for a lot of the time. Now, basically speaking, you have smartphones are divided into three categories. Basically speaking, you've got the flagships at the top, like the very best at the top. You've got the mid-rangers in the middle, and you've got the entry level at the bottom. So what it basically means is that flagship, the best that all the smartphone companies have to offer. Now, I know lots of people, there's been kind of like this argument over the years, especially when some people say that when we talk flagships do not necessarily have to mean like the bleeding edge of tech, that a company's best device is its flagship. And I think that definition, they have been using it to try and con smartphone users for the longest time, because there was so much argument over this. I think at some point on a Nigerian forum where we were where I am still very active, and like the person, like, they came out, and a certain company came out and said that this is our flagship device, and someone was like, this device is not even anywhere near flagship, it's mid-range at best. Like, no way, like a company's best device is its flagship, so therefore this is a flagship device. Like, it's also messy. But for me personally, I think that definition, whilst it is valid, it is very, very misleading. Flagship devices are the bleeding edge of tech. Then you've got the mid-rangers, that's the ones in the middle. Flagship costs a lot of money, but they also have like the greatest performance, the best. They've got the best of everything: smartphones, processors, cameras, battery tech, and all that. Mid-rangers are there in the middle. They offer you very good performance, so you don't have to spend as much as though you were getting a flagship. The entry level is for those who just basically want to do the basics with their smartphones. The basics only. And these three tiers determines the type of names that you'd get for these phones. So I'm going to start from the very bottom. I'm going to start with two names that you'd see a lot for devices on the entry level scale of things. So you've got the A, and you've got the Lite. So basically, you could see nowhere else do you find this better than on Xiaomi Redmi phones. You'd see phones like Redmi 9A, for example, Redmi 10A, for example, Redmi 6A, for example. You know, when you see that A at the back of it, you know that this device is an entry-level device. Although Google tends to name like their lowest phones with also the A symbol attached, but a Google Pixel 6a is not an entry-level device by any chance. It's an upper mid-ranger. So like these things have nuances company by company, so you've got to be able to know how to distinguish such stuff. But generally speaking, a device with an A tag or a Lite tag is an entry-level device. Absolutely entry level. Now, in the past, devices that carried the Note tag were usually devices that were bigger than the average phone, especially if you go as far back as probably 2016, 2017, when the average size of a smartphone was around 5 inches or 5.5 inches or so. So any device that was around 6 inches or more were usually called notes, or I think someone even coined the name phablet at that time, but as to distinguish between phones that were very big that were not tablets. So basically the phrase phablet has died out. That's phone plus tablet give you phablet. That phrase has basically died out because, well, all phones are like 6-inch plus now. So basically that would mean that all phones are notes without the pen. Basically. But when you hear the word note, a note is basically a mid-range device. That's basically what a note is. It's a mid-range device. That's a device that has like a very, very decent solid mid-range SoC, decent mid-range camera. That's probably 48 megapixel or a 50 megapixel Samsung Gen1, decent 5000 mAh batteries or so. Like, you know, you're dealing with a mid-range device, and you see this on Xiaomi devices too, like the Redmi Note 7, the Redmi Note 8, the Redmi Note 9, the Redmi Note 10, the Redmi Note 11. You'd also see it on devices such as like the Infinix Note, for example, Realme devices, and you know, and all that. But you know, you're dealing with, when you hear the term Note, that's basically a solid mid-range device. But most of the time, the term Note, like, because since most companies tend to release like a lot of variants of the same device, right, from the same product line, you tend to want to know that the Note is basically like the mid-range floor, where that's where they are starting like all their mid-range devices from. Now, another very easy example to use is, like I said, it's Xiaomi again. Like, I think in 2019 you had the Redmi Note 7. Basically, in 2020 you had the Redmi Note 9. So basically, you had the Note was like the Redmi Note 9 then like was like the floor, the basement floor. Like, if you're like, I want to purchase a mid-range phone, for example, and you hear basically just Note, that means you're starting from the basement, the floor. So that's when you move forward to the Note S and the Note Pro. When you hear S is basically plus. Some devices don't really use plus, they use the plus symbol, but most of them just put S there. So you know that there's like, this one is better than the Note. So when you see, for example, Redmi Note 9 and the Redmi Note 9S, what this basically means is that the Redmi Note 9S is a plus, or it's an improvement over the Redmi Note 9. So you can, that's like should be very easy to understand. So when you move on from there, you now see the Note Pros. So this means that if the basement, like I said, it's the Note, then you've got the Note S, and then you've got the Pro. So even without the Note, if you see like a device, basically a vanilla device, and then you see an S in front of it, that should tell you that the S variant is better than the vanilla one that doesn't contain any suffix after it. Then if you see the Pro, obviously you should know that anything Pro is better than anything S. So you see, for example, like I said, the Redmi Note 9 generation, Redmi Note 9, Redmi Note 9S, Redmi Note 9 Pro. So the Pro is better than the S, as well as the basic variants. So I think that should help. So if you see maybe I don't know, Redmi 9A and a Redmi Note 9S, obviously 9A entry level, completely entry level. The Notes with the 9 and the S and the Plus, it's a much higher variant of these two devices. So the next one that you've got, like, we've left the mid-range segment, now we're going up to the flagship, and then the next thing you'd see is the Max and the Ultra. Now, some mid-range devices carry the Max tag. In fact, Xiaomi are very guilty of this one. You'd hear something like the Redmi Note 9 Pro Max, right? So whatever that is, it's kind of like, you know, they're trying to tell you that this is the best mid-range that you can get, but not necessarily a flagship. It's why I said you need to understand that there's nuance and there's context to these things. So basically, a very good example is, or rather, Apple's iPhones, for example. So you'd see the vanilla, let's say iPhone 12, for example, iPhone 13, and then you see the iPhone 13 Pro. So basically, like I said, Pro is obviously better than the vanilla. Then you see the Pro Max. So for iPhones, the Pro Max is basically like top tier up there, like basically top tier at the very top. But other smartphone companies do not necessarily follow Apple's or confirm or agree with Apple's naming standards for like Pro Max. You see, that's where you now get like the Ultra. And I think this is where Samsung and Xiaomi come into the picture, where you'd see like the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra. So you get the S22 Plus. You got you start with the vanilla S22, you go with the S22 Plus, and then the Ultra. I think you can also say the same thing for Xiaomi as well. Xiaomi usually they bring in their Xiaomi, let's say Xiaomi 11, Xiaomi 11 Pro. There's a Xiaomi 11 Lite, which is actually mid-range and not an entry-level device. So like I said, nuance again. This is Xiaomi 11, Xiaomi 11 Pro, and then you've got the Xiaomi 11 Ultra. So basically, when you hear the term for iPhones Pro Max, but for Androids, you hear the term Ultra, you know that they're basically talking about the highest that you can get. And thankfully, the Ultra tag has not been abused yet the way the Pro Max tag has been abused. So please, just because you hear a Redmi Note 11 Pro Max, for example, doesn't mean that it's anywhere close to an iPhone Pro Max, not even in the slightest at all. So it's why it's important to know about nuance when it comes to naming. So lots of people they usually go out and they go and buy phones and then they see these names and it gets confusing. No, you absolutely should not. You should understand the difference between the naming schemes on Android and the naming schemes on the iPhone, which are totally different. On the iPhone, the highest you can get is the Pro Max variant. Now, all iPhones ever made are flagships, all of them. Every single last one of them were intended as a flagship. Yes, tech improves over time, and so what would be considered a flagship, say 2 years ago, say 3 years ago, say 5 years ago, would no longer be considered flagships now. But when they were made as flagships. Maybe nowadays, since tech is actually coming up, you can actually see that modern mid-rangers today are actually competing with flagships from 3 or 4 years ago. So that's how these things work. On Android, basically, when you hear the Ultra, basically, you know you're talking about the flagships. When you hear Pro Max, mid-range, Note, mid-range, A and Light, entry level. So basically, that's for that. I think it's important that lots of people know that these different smartphone categories exist and know how to like make their phone purchases. Because I see people who go and buy entry-level phones and they want to play PES on it, eFootball, or Call of Duty Mobile or PUBG Mobile on it. It's actually, it's not, you're not doing yourself any favors. That's the truth. But then again, that's why you're here, and thank you for coming. As usual, please, if this video was helpful to you, like, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell everybody. Jeff wants more, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.